So what we have here is a 2-axis carbon fiber motorized slider. Now this one comes from DigiSlider, and the motor moves the slider left and right, and the auto panning is not motorized, but it's auto panning because you have this rod in the middle here that when adjusted will rotate the pan head. So if we loosen up these screws here, we are able to move the rod around, and you'll see that it's rotating the bearing underneath the pan head. I'll show you how that works in a second, but it's basically these two knobs to adjust the rod. So what you're gonna get is the slider. You'll get it in a case. Let me show you the case. It's a cloth padded case, foam padded, custom cutout here. You'll get another piece of foam that goes on top of this, and you have a cutout for just about everything that comes with the slider. Now it doesn't come with a video head or ball head, so you need to add that yourself. So what you're gonna get is you're gonna get a controller that is battery powered. This is the battery. Now I just put my two together with some double-sided tape so that they're just one piece, but the battery is basically just your 12-volt battery that you can find online. It's a CCTV batteries. It's often sold as that with a 12-volt out. And so this is another one that I have, but you'll get these two pieces separately. I just put mine together because it's easier that way. You'll get a battery charger. You'll get a battery cable. So there's two barrel plugs on each end. That's to power the controller from the battery. You're also going to get this extension cable here. This is what connects to the motor, and then on the other opposite end is kind of like a Cat 5, Cat 6 type cable, Ethernet, and that powers up the controller. The motor from the controller to the motor. You're going to get an extension cable here for the shutter trigger. So this controller here actually can trigger the shutter on your camera. And depending on what camera you have, you're going to get a ton of different cables here. So you got just about every shutter cable you could think of, from Canon to Nikon to Sony. So matter of fact, I have a trigger for the Sony a7S II here. If you guys do time lapse with the a7S II, it doesn't have a built-in intervalometer. You download the app, but here you don't even need the app. You're just going to trigger it like a normal, like say Canon DSLR or GH4 or something. Okay, so let's get this set up. This slider is very fast to set up, and the reason why is these legs right here just flip out, just like this. And unlike the other sliders that have kind of those all-terrain legs where you unscrew each leg, you flip it out, then you lock it back down, this one just flips out. So there's no adjustment in between. It's either closed or fully open. Now, if you want to level this on an uneven surface, each foot here is can be adjusted. So you just rotate this up and down, and that will give you your adjustment for each individual leg. So you're not doing the entire leg, you're just doing the foot. So very fast to set up. You just flip it out, you're done. Let's add a ball head here. Now this is a 1/4 inch. Most video heads or some larger ball heads have 3/8 inch. So you're gonna need an adapter to adapt your 3/8 to this 1/4 inch, but it is 1/4 inch. So it's not too bad because it gives you more options to use 1/4 inch or 3/8. So here I'm just using a ball head. I prefer using a ball head on this slider because it has auto panning. So I don't need a fluid head. I don't need to pan the camera as I'm sliding. It's gonna do that automatically for me. So a ball head works great. I'm just using one with a Manfrotto RC plate here. Lock that in. Now the ball head is great because your video fluid heads can tilt forward, back, and pan side to side, but it can't tilt at an angle. So if I was to do a kind of diagonal move, I can level my camera here. If I was doing something like this, I could keep the camera level as it moves up and down. So ball head works great on this system. All right, I'll quickly run through just the panning method. So if our subject is in frame here down the middle, what we're gonna do is we need to move this slider over to the end. So we need to set up the controller for that because again, this is motorized, so it's locked in. I can't manually move it. So We have the battery to the controller. We have this cable here. So we go battery right to the controller. So that's going to power up our controller. And then we need to give power to the motor. So we're going to use this one here with the kind of the Ethernet connection. One side goes into the motor. This side goes over here. Turn the battery on. That's going to power up our controller here. And that's really all it takes to set up the slider itself. There is just the shutter release. Now, if you're using an intervalometer on the camera or in the camera, you don't need to add that. But I'll set up a cable for the shutter in a bit. But right now, this is all it takes to set up the slider. You're going to have 3 options here. I'll show you a close-up of this menu later. There's video, time-lapse, and then there's the settings. We're going to go into video, and then I'm going to move this slider over. And right now, it's moving at 100%. I can adjust the speed if I wanted to. And so we'll move this over to the end. So at this point, now that we have the camera off to the end, we want to make sure our subject that would normally be in the center remains in frame. So I'm going to loosen this up, and I'm going to move the bar. You can try to move it at the end here, but it's going to bind up a little bit. So you want to make sure you're grabbing the whole bar and you're moving it. And as you notice, as I adjust the bar, I'm adjusting the camera to say center frame. Let me turn this camera on just so I can kind of get a sense of what's in the middle there. Okay, so I'm going to lock this side down. Now we're going to move it off to the other end. And you'll notice that the camera's already moving, and it's probably going to pan too much. So let's let it track. All right, oops. Okay, so we're gonna just move this, and we tighten this knob up on the side here. So again, make sure you're moving the bar around, not just the ends, because it could bind up. So you wanna make sure it's floating. So we're gonna move back here. Now that I have a subject in frame, which is my monitor here, I can see that it's going to auto pan from one side. You notice the camera is kind of pointing straight, and then as it gets down to the other end, it's going to keep that subject in frame. So it's going to auto pan out this way. So that's how it works. Now, in order to get our time lapse going, we're going to fire the shutter on this camera. So if you're doing photos, obviously you want to be in like a a manual mode. Set your shutter speed, your aperture, iris. So I need the extension cable for the Sony, which is kind of a multi-port. Looks like a USB. We're going to plug that in. Now all of the shutter cables are about this length, and so you get this extension cable here. It's got a 3.5, and then we just plug it in here. And then we plug the other end into the controller, to this controller right here. So now if I wanted to set my time lapse, I'm going to exit the video mode. To do any exiting from the menu, you press and you hold the joystick down in the center. I'm going to maneuver down to time lapse, and then here I can adjust things like the distance it moves every time it fires the shutter. It's going to move. I can set the distance. So we call that the motor steps. How many steps for that motor? So we can increase that so that it moves big jumps in between every shot, or very little movements in between every shot. Just so I can exaggerate the movement, I'll let this move quite a bit, but typically in a time lapse, I let it move just a little at a time. Okay, so what's cool about this too is that, let's say you're setting your shutter to trigger at 5 seconds. It's going to initiate that 5-second shutter, and then it's going to move. So you can program the delay of the movement to, coordinate with your shutter. So if we're going to do, say, a 3-second exposure, we may want to set the interval between shots to, another like 5 seconds or something like that. Give it some time in between your exposure. Now my shots here are going to be fairly quick. And so now that we have that set, we just press the button down here, the joystick button, and then we choose the direction. So we're going to just start our direction to the right. And then you notice it is firing and it is moving. Now again, I've increased the steps for the time lapse just to show you guys how the shoot, move, shoot works. So let me stop this. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to reduce the steps so you guys could see how little it can move between shots. So we'll do 0.04 steps. And you can see it's moving at a shorter distance now while it's taking the images. So very simple to set up. It's a shoot, move, shoot. So it's not continuously moving as your camera's taking pictures. That doesn't work very well for long exposure stuff like nighttime stuff. So this is a true shoot, move, shoot time-lapse slider. And that's it. That's a really quick look. As this goes down from one end to the other, it's automatically going to pan. It's automatically going to keep your subject in frame. So, you know, very fast to set up, very lightweight, very simple system to use. I'm going to go through the menu now just to kind of show you guys how to set that up, and then we'll wrap up this video. All right, so here's a closer look at the menu in the controller here. We have video, time lapse, and settings. So for video shot, we click down into the joystick here, and you'll see that we have speed and we have direction. If we move the joystick in different ways, we can already get the slider moving in real time, and we can push up and down to change the speed. So we could reduce the speed to say 30%, choose our direction, and it's moving at that speed. So here we can increase the speed and change direction. To exit out of any menu, press and hold, and that'll bring us back. So that's the really quick look at video shot. Now for time lapse, we'd go down to time lapse. You see we have a number of steps, and 0.04s is like lower. If I want to increase that, let me increase that number here. And that's in between shots. That's how far the slider is going to move in between shots. So again, let me exaggerate this, and then to start the process, you click down once, and then we're in here. That shows you the number of photos, the battery, and then now we just go into the direction. So we just choose our direction. You'll see that it's moving, it's taking a picture, it's moving, and it's taking a picture. So we'll stop that. Again, to exit out, we just press and hold. Now those movements were quite a bit in between shots because we exaggerated those movements, but here we would reduce that, and we would get smaller movements in between shots. All right, we've got the DigiSlider set up here with the Sony a7S II. What's great about this remote is it actually triggers the shutter on the a7S II. So there's a cable that connects from the remote here, and this is the battery pack that's powering up the remote, and then this Ethernet connection here goes out to the motor to power the motor. So everything is powered off this little battery over here, 12-volt battery. So to get this set up the way I want, I have my kids out there on the beach, and I'm going to keep them in frame. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go into the video mode, and I'm going to move this over to the side. And so I'm operating this real-time movement, and you'll notice that the camera is going to auto pan. As it gets to the end, I want to make sure that the kids are somewhat in frame and center. So to do that, I'm going to loosen this up here, and then I would push this in and out so that my kids are kind of in center there. Now I'm going to move this to the opposite direction, and then when it gets to the other end, I want to make sure that they're also in frame. And then once I set those two endpoints, I'm pretty much set for the time lapse. So I'm going to move this all the way to the end. All right, and we're a little off here, so I'm going to move this. All right, so they're in center on this side, and when it tracks over here, they're going to be in center over here. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to exit out. To exit out, you just hold the joystick in the center. So we're exiting out of real-time video mode. Now we're going to go to time-lapse mode. And I have this set up for about 1.5 second delay, and then it takes a photo. And I have my camera set up to the right shutter speed and aperture that I want. So this is just going to trigger the camera, and then it's going to move the slider and then shoot, move, shoot, move, shoot. So the other sliders that are just fully motorized, they just continue moving, and then your camera just keeps firing. Now if your camera is doing a long exposure, you're going to get blurry images. So having a shoot, moves, shoot slider is really beneficial when you're doing long exposure stuff. Anyways, to start this, we're going to press down, choose the direction we want to move. I'm going to start here, and so it's already starting, so I chose the slider to move to the right. If we look at the slider, or if we look at the camera, you can see that it is firing right now. And then this remote here is actually telling me how many shots I have left. You could choose how many photos you want to actually take. So as this tracks across the slider here, again, they'll stay in the center frame here, and as it tracks, they'll remain in the center all the way to the end. They'll also remain in the center. So it's auto panning. So it's 2-axis without any real control over the second axis except for this little bar. So it's very easy to set up. It's not complicated at all. And we'll wait about 15 minutes and see how this time lapse comes out. Okay, so that's a look at the DigiSlider 2-axis carbon fiber motorized slider with time-lapse controller that allows you to do the shoot, move, shoot feature. Now it does do time-lapse. It will move in auto pan. You can also do real-time video movement. So here, if I move the slider, it's moving. It's going to automatically pan. It's going to automatically keep my subject in frame. Now you do hear the motor noise. I have a microphone right above me right here, which probably not going to work best for your interviews. But if you're doing videos on, say, products, food, you're doing a music video, wedding, where you're doing montage, where you're going to overlay it with music, anything that doesn't require audio, yeah, this thing's going to work great. Real-time video moves, automatic panning, again, your time-lapse with your shoot, move, shoot. This is probably one of the most affordable time-lapse sliders that has auto panning with the true shoot, move, shoot function. And it comes with a ton of cables to fit just about any camera out there. Very easy to set up, a lot of, minimal amount of gear. If you guys have any questions, leave some comments below. I'll also have a link to this product below this video or on the blog, cheesycam.com.